We just got back from a 10-day vacation. It is the first vacation that we have taken in 3 years. We really needed to kind of get things in line before we went anywhere for a long period of time. It was very needed, it was a lot of fun, and now we're back. We are expecting a winter storm here coming up tonight and into tomorrow, so I wanted to get my chicken coops cleaned out. I've been doing it more often lately because I really want the fertilizer for all of my berry plants. And then I'm gonna go down to our barn and gather some hay. That is the only dry hay we have on our property right now. So I'm hoping I can gather some from the ground there and get them a nice warm dry bed for the upcoming storm.
Chicken car lady, and this rooster comes up to me and does this. I don't think I would like him.
We did get some snow last night and we're pretty much snowed in for the day. I'm not planning on going anywhere, which makes it perfect for me to share with you some more pantry meals and things that I make every day. So this morning for breakfast, just really simple and easy. Last night I soaked some steel cut oats with just water and a little bit of sourdough starter. Kind of helps break down all of the things in the oats that are hard to digest. It also makes it super fast to cook. So instead of like 30 or 40 minutes, however long it normally cooks on the stovetop, the steel cut oats are done in about 10 minutes. Couple of tips with this: keep an eye on the oats. They do burn super duper easily, so I start them on high and then I turn them down a little bit to medium, and you can put a lid on the top to keep some of that liquid in there. It's not so bad with the soaked oats, but if you were to just go ahead and cook them as is without soaking them, a lot of times the oats will boil up really high and boil over the top. All of the liquid will, if you're using a really small pan. So my advice is to use a bigger pan. Okay, so now I'm gonna go ahead and go in the pantry and get some toppings for on top of the steel cut oats. You can use whatever you have, but I'm gonna show you what we usually use for this.
We're on generator power.
Oh, really? Oh, that just switched. Is it just like the monthly thing, or are we out of power? Like for real?
Power just went out.
So I just came outside for a minute to check things out. Our generator is on. The power went out this morning as I was making breakfast, but it's working just fine. So far we haven't had to use it yet, but today is the day. So it's on. We're pretty far out in the country and the last on our electrical line, so it's good that we have one. It's a whole house generator and just automatically transfers if the power goes out. For lunch, I am going to be rehydrating some of that freeze-dried chili I made over the summer with all of those fresh ingredients, and to go with it, I'm going to be making some cornbread. For the cornbread, I am just using a recipe I found online. I heavily adapt my cornbread recipes though because I have some different dietary needs, and I'm also not a huge fan of white flour, so I usually try and mix in some wheat into it or some pastry flour. I'm gonna get started by taking out all of the things that I need for the cornbread recipe, setting them out on the counter so I'm ready to measure and put everything together. And usually I use coconut milk for this recipe. I took out the coconut milk and I decided against it this time because it does leave like a strong coconut flavor just throughout the whole cornbread. So instead I'm using some of our leftover oats from breakfast, and I'm gonna make an oat milk to use in place of that. Starting by doing like a cup of oats to 4 cups of water. That's usually what I do for my almond milk. Try not to spill any of it. 1/8 teaspoon of sea salt in there. And then I'm gonna do a 1/2 teaspoon of some of our vanilla extract. I'm gonna do just a touch of maple syrup, probably a tablespoon worth. I'm using it as a substitute for buttermilk. I'm gonna do the same amount of buttermilk that the recipe calls for and add in a little bit of vinegar or lemon juice is what I add to kind of give it a little bit more of an acid, the way that buttermilk is an acid. I stirred together this mixture. It's gonna soak for 30 minutes, and then while that's soaking, I'm gonna turn on my oven, prep my pan, and prepare all of my other ingredients. Back when I made the freeze-dried chili, I made it without a liquid because I intended on adding liquid afterwards. I intended on adding beef broth. I actually didn't have any beef broth on this day, so I ended up using turkey broth. And I used 2 jars of turkey broth and then 2 jars of the freeze-dried chili, and it just really wasn't thick enough. So I ended up adding another jar of chili, so 3 quart jars total, and then I taste tested it and it just didn't have enough spice. So I ended up adding some more chili powder for some extra spice and a jar of diced tomatoes because it didn't really taste like it had enough tomatoes either. So it was really difficult to kind of get it right without having a liquid in there. So I had to kind of doctor it up afterwards.
It goes over to.
How is it?
It's really good. It is slightly different than like a regular batch of chili, but not. I mean, just kind of like texture. You know, it's like not as chunky, but it tastes just fine. It's really good. It's like smaller bits, and you know, like.
Oh yeah, because when it was freeze dried, it kind of broke apart.
It broke apart, yeah. So it's like
okay.
smaller textural bits.
Okay, I get what you're saying now. For dinner tonight, we are making a family favorite. It's called lemon chicken pasta. We got the idea for this recipe from this book. It's called The Homemade Kitchen. And she has a recipe in here that's called fettuccine with preserved lemon and roasted garlic. And so we basically made this and we loved it and we wanted to make it more of a meal. So we add chicken and we usually add kale. I actually don't have kale today, so we'll be using spinach. I'm gonna get started by cutting the tops off of some garlic, and then we drizzle a little olive oil on there and wrap them in foil and roast them in the oven. And then I'll chop up some preserved lemons and we will mix all that together. After you chop the tops off the garlic, you can see here this is a hard neck, so it was a little bit difficult to cut around the stem. I just cut the outside. You just put it on some foil. I'm gonna wrap a couple of these in foil, and then you drizzle a little olive oil on top and then just wrap them together. So in this jar, I have some salt preserved lemons that I'm going to chop up really fine, and they will go with the garlic. Yesterday I had a lot of good intentions of coming out here to harvest some spinach in preparation for the weather and the coming week and just having some fresh greens to use, but I never made it out here because it started to rain and snow a lot earlier than anticipated. So I'm out now and I'm just gonna harvest some of this spinach. After harvesting the spinach and then chopping it up, about that time my garlic was finished, so I took it out of the oven, and it takes a little while to cool down so you can handle it, but I usually just take the whole clove and then I just squeeze the roasted garlic right into the food processor. Because we like to have this for leftovers, we make a lot of this lemon chicken pasta, so I'm making a lot of the sauce as well. So I put in probably 7 garlic bulbs, roasted garlic bulbs in there, and then I add in some olive oil, salt, and pepper, some spices, and then I'm going to cook up my chicken. Sometimes I use leftover chicken. Today I just pan fried some chicken, and I'm using cast iron to cook this. I just cook it for 2 minutes on high on one side, and then I put some salt and pepper on it, and then I flip it over and put a lid on and turn it off. And then I just leave it for the rest of the time, and it cooks the rest of the way for me. If you have thicker chicken breasts, you might want to turn it down to low and then for another 5 minutes and then turn it off.
Welcome to Cam's Wintertime Cooking Show. We're doing homemade pasta today. I have everything pre-measured out here. For our family, for one dinner, we usually do 4 to 5 batches of pasta, just to give you a relative, volume reference here. We have 250 grams. I've already pre-measured all these out on our scale. 250 grams of the flour mix. And this one is basically half durum wheat and half white flour. So that goes in. And then I have 105 to 108 grams of egg mixture, which is basically 1 cracked egg plus water to make up the difference. Oh shoot, I should have put that in later. That's okay.
Wrong order.
Okay. Then I press start. It'll still, it's not like gonna ruin it, but I accidentally poured this straight into the batch. What the recipe asks you to do is pour it in this little slot after the flour is already churning, just probably for better consistency, but it's still gonna turn out. So then this will mix for 3 minutes, and then the auger will reverse direction and it will start extruding it out of here. You can already see I've done 1 batch, and I'll just keep doing some more until we're ready to put it in the pot. Okay, now it's coming out, as you can see. And then I just wait till it's like spaghetti noodle length, and then I cut it with this little slicer. And kind of just lay them out so they don't get crushed.
Fresh pasta cooks really fast because it's fresh and not dehydrated. So we're usually cooking it for about 3 minutes and letting it boil during that time. And then for this particular dish, we just remove it out of the pasta water and then cook the next batch of noodles in the same water. Sometimes we'll have to add a little bit more water to it because the noodles will absorb some of that water. But for the most part, we just keep cooking it in that same pasta water because we are going to reserve it for later in case the sauce needs a little bit more liquid. During the time that we cooked all of the pasta, the chicken was able to sit and just cook through the rest of the way, and it was perfect. When I pulled it out, it was completely cooked but not overcooked, and I chop it into bite-sized pieces and then add it to those noodles that we already cooked. And then after that, I add in the chopped spinach, and it looks like a lot when you initially add it, but when it kind of wilts down, it's not very much. You'll see I actually ended up adding more at the very end. And then I'm adding that preserved lemon and garlic sauce. In the original recipe to this, it calls for Parmesan cheese. I usually do add the Parmesan cheese, although a lot less because I can only tolerate a tiny bit. It is really, really tasty in this dish. However, on this particular day, we did not have any in the refrigerator, so I just went on without it. It still ended up tasting really good just as it was. Another thing we were doing is we played around with lighting our oil lamps that we bought for emergencies. Our power was actually still working because of our generator, but it was not hooked back up to the electrical company at this point when we were eating dinner, so we thought we would try out these lamps that we got.
Works! And then you go high flame or low flame. We'll go kind of in the middle.
This